everyone, I'm Lindsay Lewis, editor of Building Enclosure. Thanks for listening along with us today. On September 11th at 11 a.m., we have a free webinar titled Building Science for Architects. This presentation will help architects ask the right questions and help you hold your specifications when value engineering comes after a robust design. Today, I'm joined by presenters Elizabeth Grant, Building and Roofing Science Research Lead at GAF CPLAST, and Andrea Wagner-Watts, the Building Science Education Manager for GAF and CPLAST, to chat about the upcoming webinar. Elizabeth and Andy, thanks for sitting with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So to get started, where does thermal bridging come into play when it comes to roof design?
Okay, so thermal bridging's been a problem in building enclosures broadly for some time. I mean, we talk a lot about linear thermal bridges in wall assemblies, but in roofing, the bigger issue is penetrations, such as roof drains, roof vents, anything that pierces through the insulation. And the biggest problem actually is fasteners, because there's so many of them. So fasteners and plates that hold the roof membrane down or hold insulation components down. So that we call those point thermal bridges. And all of those combined can reduce the performance of the insulation.
Well, on to another topic that you'll be addressing during the webinar, vapor movement. When it comes to vapor movement, what increases risk of condensation issues in the enclosure?
So first off is stopping the source of the moisture vapor. And our biggest source of moisture vapor is actually air. And so we're going to talk during the webinar about how we ensure that we have continuous air barriers, tight transitions to prevent any moist air from getting into spaces where it can condense. And then the second item that is going to reduce your risk of condensation is related to the thermal component, which is making sure that our dew point falls within our building enclosure, whether that be your wall or your roof, in a place where that moisture can be managed. So if it condenses within a drainage cavity in a wall, for example, we know it can drain away and not cause a problem. So if it condenses where we can manage it, moisture condensation isn't going to be a risk.
Now, can you name some most important aspects of enclosure design when it comes to resiliency?
So if I think about some of the key aspects, three things come to mind. Number one is continuity. And that means continuity of our control layers, our air control layer that we just mentioned, because it controls both air and heat movement, as well as moisture movement within our assembly. And that really ties into having continuity between our different building components and between our wall and our roof, which is the tricky part of the enclosure design. Number two is going to be redundancy. So building redundancy into our assemblies and into our systems. So this could be a multi-ply hybrid roof assembly, for example, which will build in a little more robustness. And then finally, durability. So one example for a roof could be adding in a cover board that's going to provide superior protection for hail or foot traffic, and all of these bigger storms that are coming through.
Now, something that we don't really want to do when it comes to lowering building performance, what should architects avoid?
All right, so I think we've kind of hit it, and we're going to do it in the negative now. So don't do too much fastener penetration if you can avoid it. So you can avoid having penetration through your roof assembly by adhering layers whenever you can. That has other benefits too that we'll talk about. But before we get into that, I think the biggest thing is to avoid bulk water, right? So you really want to make sure that water doesn't get into your building. So that means good flashings. That means making sure that things slope toward drains or away from the building. And make sure that you have weeps or you have good sealants in your building. So all of these things combine to keep us from having bulk water in the assembly. Another thing, then we can start talking about the thermal component, the thermal bridging and minimizing that. So ways we do that, as I mentioned, you can adhere layers. You can also bury fasteners below insulation layers or below a cover board, which also gives you that durability piece. And as Andy mentioned, the air is a really big problem. So making sure that air barrier is continuous and don't allow breaches in that air barrier. And then finally, making sure you control vapor. right? Making sure that vapor is, water vapor is not allowed to penetrate into areas where you don't want it, where there's a potential for condensation.
Now, the main topic of your webinar is building science, which building science I feel like is something that's architects learn more in the field than they do in school. So with that being said, GAFC Plus, do you have any materials for architects wanting to learn more about building science?
Always. And that is the biggest focus of our team, is helping to be that resource for this information. I think a great place to start is to follow our team on LinkedIn. It's the GAF CPLAS Building and Roofing Science team. We are frequently updating our page with different resources from multiple locations, some that we've created, some that have been created by others. And so that's kind of a one-stop shop for different sources. Building Enclosure hosts a number of our webinars and CEU articles if you want to look on demand and the social media aspect isn't what you're looking for. So check out there. You can also Google roof views and you'll find our blog that has a number of different articles that are kind of short and sweet snippets of information. And our team is always available one-on-one for a quick sit down to talk about specific projects and specific questions that you may have.
Yeah, and for anyone listening, my unbiased opinion is that GFC Plus Building Science team is absolutely phenomenal. So if you are on social media, be sure to find them and follow them because they're always sharing awesome information. Now,
Thank you.
lastly, yeah, you're welcome. Now, lastly, what else will attendees learn on September 11th?
So, we've talked a little bit about the theory behind this in this brief exchange here, but, it always helps to have good examples. So, we're going to share some good, bad, and ugly details and stories from the field and things that we personally had issues with and seen issues with. So I think that really brings it home and will scare you a little bit maybe, but in a good way, to kind of make sure everybody understands the importance of building science.
Well, thank you both again for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Be sure to head to continuingeducation.bmpmedia.com to sign up for this free webinar on September 11th. Until next time, visit us on buildingenclosureonline.com for your technical and educational resources.